Nick, time for us to go viral. Last night, Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph got into a very ugly fight on Thursday Night Football. Of course, other players from around the league chimed in. Pat Mahomes tweeted, bro, I can't even believe that just happened.
Look, I think Myles should get 6 games, but had he done it to Mahomes, it's a lifetime ban.
Oh,
yes,
I'm just letting you know right now.
J.J. Watt tweeting, that is insanity. Wow.
These are the tamest takes, by the way. These aren't that scorching. There were some scorchers last night.
Des Bryant said he's done for the rest of the year.
You know, one of these 3 tweets is not like the other. Patrick Mahomes, reigning league MVP, J.J. Watt.
Des is like, I got something to say as a player. Let me tell you what I think.
I feel like Dez's tweet should go on the same screen right now as the Antonio Brown's. Like, interesting, but not sure what your status is at the moment.
Yep. All right, time for some stories to start your morning. Let's start with some basketball. Here we go, Nick. Clippers taking on the Pelicans last night. Paul George making his L.A. debut. Lonely night for him without his buddy Kawhi Leonard in the lineup. Why, Nick?
Oh, load management, I suppose.
There you go. PG-13 finishing with 33 points and 9 boards, but Clippers take the L. 132-127 was the final. Nick, what'd you make of PG's debut?
Oh, I mean, he was great. I mean, you said it, Jenna. 33 points in 24 minutes. It was in a bit of foul trouble, but looked no worse for the wear with the double shoulder surgery this offseason. But this is a brutal loss for the Clippers. And all of these games are going to matter at the end of the year. The Pelicans going into the game had the 3rd worst record in basketball, and they were without all the players they traded for from L.A. Hart, Ball, and Ingram. Ingram, who's been great this year, without all of them. Paul George has that great game, and you still lose. One thinks that if Kawhi Leonard was there, they might have gotten that win. Now 7-2 with Kawhi, 0-3 without him. And, Danny, I really think that's going to matter when we have seeding at the end of the year.
I think so, too. I think they're getting a little bit too cute starting it this early, taking for granted how tough it's going to be in this Western Conference with some of the competition there. And I think depth is a very real issue for this team. I still think they need to add another piece to the puzzle to be taken seriously as a title contender.
All right, let's move on to Carmelo Anthony. After a year off from the NBA, not by choice, mind you, Melo is making a comeback with the Blazers signing the 35-year-old to a non-guaranteed deal. Nick, good fit for Melo in Portland. Makes you happy. You're happy.
I'm so happy. Listen, Carmelo Anthony, one of 5 players in the history. This is year 17 for Melo. He's one of 5 players in the history of basketball to average at least 20 a game the first 14 years of his career. Those other guys are names you might know, like Kareem, Shaq, Michael, and LeBron. And the way his career was ending was going to put such a tarnish on what he had accomplished. One of the best professional scorers of his era. Listen, Portland is right now flailing. They need some influx of talent. I don't know if this helps their defense, but I'm glad Melo's going to get a legitimate farewell, and I think he might be able to help them a little bit. I'm just happy for my guy, Carmelo.
I'm going to go out there and say it definitely does not help their defense. And I guess it's a good thing. This does seem like a desperate move by Portland to bring out something on a team that's 4-8 and reeling right now, as you mentioned. But you said the way it was going for Carmelo, are we certain that he's going to come back and it's going to look better at 35 years old at this point? I'm not so sure.
I don't know if
I hope it does. I would love to see him go out on a high note.
I just want him to have something of a farewell tour, not Daryl Morey going to his hotel room and being like, you're done, and then he's at Lifetime Fitness.
On to some football now. Ravens hosting the Texans. Lamar Jackson has Baltimore on a 5-game win streak. Deshaun Watson has the Texans in first place in the AFC South. Nick, who's got the edge come Sunday?
I give it to Baltimore. I think the Texans have the slightly better quarterback, and that's no disrespect to Lamar. I think Baltimore, if we're doing a tale of the tape, has everything else. They have the better running game. They have the better special teams. They have better defense. They have the far better coaching staff and head coach, and the game's in Baltimore. So for all those reasons, I like the Ravens on Sunday in a game that could decide the 2 seed in the AFC. Now, if the Texans win in particular, puts them in position. If the Ravens win, not only would they be the 2 seed right now, they would have the head-to-head tiebreaker, Danny, over the Patriots and the Texans.
I give the Ravens the edge as well. I do think you have a slight edge at quarterback, as you mentioned, at wide receiver with the Texans. But what you have with the Ravens is something so unique, so special, so dominant in that run game, combined with Lamar Jackson and the uniqueness of what they're doing. Nobody has an answer for it. We saw the Heisman formation last. I still think there's still things that they have not revealed offensively, which they are saving in their back pocket for a run down the stretch.
All right, on to the Steelers and the Browns in a game that'll be remembered for little else other than This horrific mess in the waning seconds of the game. Mason Rudolph and Myles Garrett in a scuffle. Garrett will rip off Rudolph's helmet, strike him in the head with it, and all-out brawl ensues. Players running in from the sideline. Garrett and two others were ejected. Browns won, but nobody was talking about that afterwards. Here's Freddie Kitchens after the game.
Does any of this go back to the preseason in Indianapolis when fights were, I don't want to say encouraged, but were okay?
No. Are encouraged. I never okayed fights. Did you say that? Did you say I okayed fights? I never okayed fights. Did I want them to get after their ass? Yes, I did. But that's not fighting. That's not after the whistle. But that's between the whistles, yes. I never condone fighting on a football field because that's penalties. I don't coach penalties. I don't coach false starts. I don't coach after the whistle grabbing somebody's face mask. I don't coach that.
All right, well, shy of the face mask part, all those things have happened in almost every game. There have been penalties, and it's been whistle after whistle and undisciplined behavior from this team the whole season. Obviously, it escalated with what happened last night. Do you think the Browns, Nick, their lack of discipline is on head coach Freddie Kitchens?
I don't put it solely on Freddie Kitchens because this is who they were last year. But Freddie Kitchens didn't put a stop to it. There's a very interesting moment in your favorite show, Hard Knocks, Jenna, where Todd Haley, my old friend Todd Haley, who once was the offensive coordinator there, gets into it with Greg Williams because it was the defensive coordinator. And then the eventually interim head coach. Because during practice, they're committing penalties after the play, hitting the quarterback after the play. And Haley's furious, and he and Greg Williams go at it. And then in that week's episode, in the preseason game that week, they're trying to get off the field to stay alive in the preseason game, and there is a post-snap penalty on the Cleveland defense, and they cut to Haley, and he goes, well, we practice it, we deserve it. This is who we are. And that is who they were last year. And that is who they've been this year. And nobody has been able to get a hold of it. Myles Garrett, I don't think he has a history of this, but in the first game of the year, he got fined for an illegal hit. In the second game of the year, he had multiple late hits, one of which broke Trevor Siemian's leg. Another play not that dissimilar to the beginning of this one, where you're taking a guy down that you don't have to take down. He is what you call an edge player. And it is hard to be a great pass rusher without being an edge player because of the nature of the position. But if you were to tell me, but blind reveal, there's going to be a team this week that in the waning moments of a game has a totally unnecessary melee, I would either guess the Raiders just because of the 35-year history, even if that's not who they've been this year, or the Browns, because they have shown a shocking lack of discipline year over year. It is on a head coach to get a hold of it. It's one of the reasons I think Freddie Kitchens isn't the right guy for the job, because he has not been able to, Danny. I don't place the blame for this solely on him, because it was trending this way, but he wasn't able to put a stop to it the way maybe a more seasoned or veteran head coach could have.
I think it's totally unfair to put this incident on Freddie Kitchens. The lack of discipline across the board, where they have so many penalties throughout the season, that is absolutely fair, because as the head coach, you are responsible for the culture. And the culture that transpires in practice, in the locker room, in an off season, it becomes contagious so that it creeps onto the game field. So there obviously is a problem with this team and a lack of discipline. So from that standpoint, I get that Freddie Kitchens is defensive because it was asked about this specifically, but overarching, he's got to take more accountability for this team's lack of discipline.
And what about the fact that even if we don't hold Freddie Kitchens accountable at all for the end of the play, what about holding him accountable, or the team as a whole accountable, for the beginning of the play? Because it is an undisciplined team that in a game that you have won, that your best defensive player would think it is at all reasonable, when the ball is clearly out of the quarterback's hands, to take him to the ground for no reason whatsoever. If you want to make the argument in the first quarter of a game against a divisional rival, you'll risk a 15-yard penalty to send a message to the opposing team's quarterback. I know the league wouldn't like hearing that, but that is kind of football. There is an element of sometimes 15 yards is worth letting the other guy know, I'm going to be here all day long. There's 8 seconds left in this football game. The game is over. You're up 2 scores, and it all started because Myles Garrett took him to the ground unnecessarily. That is something that has to be coached out of guys, and you don't see, and I hate to use the cliche, you don't see the New England Patriots doing this.
No, of course not.
You don't see teams that have it together, forget the end, doing the things that led to the beginning of this.
I think the opposite of undisciplined, obviously, is discipline, but I do think the opposite of undisciplined is a smart football team, and that's where I would say this Browns team is not very smart, because I do think there's a time when you can take those risks, and it's worth it to get a penalty on a quarterback, make him hear ghosts or footsteps throughout the game, but this was not one of those times, and I think that's why even his own teammates, when Baker was calling him out, when his coach is calling him out, it is not a very smart play, because it's going to have much bigger ramifications on whether this team can actually make the unlikely playoff run that I thought they could, and now it's in doubt.
And then, Danny, you and I were just talking this morning, last week's game. Browns come out, they score a touchdown. Jarvis Landry, wonderful. Instead of just having an extra kick, yaps his mouth off, undisciplined. Now they're thrown all the way back and they miss the extra point. It's something small, but it was discipline at the end of the game. It's discipline right off the top. If there's no accountability on the team, then you're going to keep having this. I think that comes from the head coach.
It does. That's the culture you're talking about. And it does start in practice, in details, and some of the stuff that coaches, and I've played in a lot of organizations, they have little rules that they will implement throughout, the locker room. And sometimes it's as simple as what your locker should look like. Should you clean up the, should you clean up the mess around your locker? Or if you have a penalty at practice, do you get punished for it? Some teams, the bad teams that I played for, would let it slide. Oh, well, he'll take care of that during a game, or you get a talking to. Other ones, there would be more significant punishment. Maybe if there was a fight that broke out at practice, not only those players would have to run, but the entire team would have to run. There are ways you can coach these out of these players.
And last, Freddie Kitchens feels the heat. He was one of the most interesting things in that press conference right there was he said, I don't coach false starts. Bro, ain't nobody talking about false starts right now. But he clearly has heard the criticism about how penalized they are. Like, I'm going to play pop psychologist for a moment. He knows the criticism, how penalized the Browns have been prior to the last few weeks, knows that's fallen on him, and I guarantee you he said in some of these private conversations, man, they're blaming me for the false starts? It's my fault that our left guard can't stay in his stance, and it came out there because what was supposed to be his best win, his second best win as head coach.
No one's even talking about it.
Nobody cares, and instead, the most talented defensive player on your team, a guy who was still alive for Defensive Player of the Year, is not going to play for at least the next month, if not longer.
You know where this would never happen? In New England. Speaking of which, Patriots